Life in a Year is definitely one of those films that, has that vibe of your usual young adult. One half of the two are gonna die, but it gives so much that's unexpected that it kind of throws you off a little bit. So, the film is about a young man named Darren, played by Jaden Smith, who lives under this plan, this very strict, like horse with blinders plan that his father Xavier, played by Cuba Gooding Jr, has made for him. One that is rooted very much in the fact that Xavier grew up poor, and even though he has money now, he's trying to build a legacy. So in order to build that legacy, he, rather than strangely not have his son like continue the family business, which is janitorial services, he wants his son to go to Harvard. He wants him to become a lawyer. And while Darren, for most of his life, has lived or tried to live up to these expectations so that this plan can be executed and become what his dad wants it to be, it's coming to that point where Darren's at that crossroads around, 17, 18, where it's like, am I going to stay on the path I'm on or am I going to choose something different? And one of the catalysts for him even exploring something different is Isabel, played by Cara Delevingne. She is someone that definitely has that manic pixie dream girl vibe because she has this crazy colored hair. She is definitely rebellious, does her own thing, yet at the same time, as we'll talk about later, she really doesn't fit that profile. Rather, she's just somebody who, with being given probably a year to live, she doesn't really have time for bullshit. And the bullshit for her is like she doesn't have like long term dreams or goals. It's basically living in the now. And when it comes to Darren, who she knows has so much life ahead of him, she's trying to get him to stop thinking long term and start thinking short term. What can he do to get the life that he wants and the life he wants to live? Cool. So when it comes to the casting characters, we're not going to name everybody on the cast list. We're just going to stick to the core group who I think have a strong effect on the film. First and foremost is Darren, played by Jaden Smith, who is, your usual high school kid who has been trained to think without college his life is going to be difficult. So he's on the Honor Society, he's a track star with a state record, which he'll mention multiple times in the film, and then he's also on student government. Now, one of the things that is a continuous theme when it comes to this film is they'll mention something like somebody was in student government or that when it comes to Xavier, he owns his own business. But as for the details, like the specifics when it comes to these things, it doesn't necessarily dive into them. So while you know that Darren, who I might say is Jaden a few times, which is a mistake, but work with me here. When it comes to Darren, while you know he's on SGA, you don't know if he's the president, vice president, treasurer, secretary, or whatever role may be at your local school. We just know that he's on SGA. But with that in mind, you can definitely tell when it comes to told you, when it comes to Darren that he's one of those kids who's kind of suppressed who he is or who he wants to be just for his father's approval. And with that, you can definitely get this vibe that he's not one of those kids who you think is about to blow up at any moment, but he has become so used to kind of belittling himself to fit into his father's dream that he's become very much comfortable in that image. Now, switching to Xavier. Xavier, we're told, was poor, was a janitor, and then through means not fully explained, he went from a janitor to owning a janitorial company and now moving to a nice area where he has what looks like a McMansion. And again, as noted just like a minute ago, as for whether he went to college, how he started this business, how he runs this business, even why he's not pushing Darren to run the family business since that would be him building a legacy, that's not mentioned. All we know is Xavier is somebody who I would definitely say has a bit of an insecurity or fear that the money he made, the wealth he made, the life he built for himself, that Darren may not be able to replicate that. And with that, you can definitely see that when it comes to love and affection, that is secondary to Xavier making sure his son has stability and is able to take care of himself in case anything happens to him or his mother, Catherine. Now, Catherine, played by Nia Long, is Xavier, who I hope I mentioned was Cuba Gooding Jr.'s wife. And when it comes to Catherine, you're given the vibe that she's a housewife because you don't really hear her talk about anything that doesn't deal with either being Xavier's wife or being Darren's mother. And when it comes to her role in the family, it's pretty much just making sure Darren has a personal life. For if it was up to Xavier, he would have been like drill sergeant. You go running at this time, you study at this time, you don't have time for friends, you don't need friends, you definitely don't need a girlfriend because that's just a distraction. But when it comes to Catherine, she tries to like remind Xavier and allow Darren to be a teenager and have something for himself. Which leads us to Isabel. Isabel is somebody who doesn't know who her father is. Her mom, who was a drug addict, she abandoned her to a babysitter when she was 6. And with that, you can definitely understand why, even with her now having cancer, that cancer might have gave her a death sentence since she's late stage ovarian cancer, but she's probably being who she always was. For what that lack of stability, lack of consistency, especially from both parents abandoning you, that rebellious kind of live life in the moment type of thing really fits who she is. It doesn't, and when you add in the fact that her caretaker named Phil doesn't seem like they're trying to like play that parental role. You have to go to school, but rather, you know, I'll take care of you, but I'm not going to be responsible for you the same way a parent would be. It allows you to understand why she has become this blue-haired, funky look type of person who is perfect for Darren, yet at the same time is one of those type of people who, in order to get to know them, you have to understand that they have to take the time and they have to really make the effort to set aside their baggage, fold it up real nice, and be able to trust you with everything that they have laid out, if that makes sense. And just going into her caretaker, there, Phil, played by Christy Elliott, and if I'm missing characters' names, my bad. And when it comes to Phil, one of the things that really you may like about this film is it doesn't harp on the fact of what Phil can or should be considered. If you're someone who is really about gender pronouns, this film, especially if you like gender pronouns in terms of you don't think they should matter, Phil is one of those people who exhibit that whole pronouns shouldn't matter things because Phil is treated just as Phil. When Darren meets Phil, there's a question of what to call them, and Isabel just stops all the confusion, just that's Phil. When Xavier meets Phil, it was confused about who's Isabel. The moment is treated as, and more granted, this is more so a highlight than like a character description, but the way it's pushed is that Phil is just Isabel's person, caretaker, and the adjectives that really matter and not what their gender identity is. But with that said, Phil does work at night as a possible drag performer, so take that as you will. Which leaves one last character, and that's Amanda. Amanda is Isabel's mother, who abandoned her at 6 years old, and the only means of keeping contact with Isabel is her sending postcards of the beach. Now, why exactly the beach? That is not revealed, but we do actually see Amanda in the film, and her and Isabel have multiple moments of confronting the past. So, in terms of things worth noting, I will say that in terms of the rating, there's nothing like major that may get you worried. Yes, there's cursing, there's drug use, but even the occasional skimpy outfit that Delevingne wears, but it's nothing gratuitous. It's the film very much tries to root itself in not being over the top. Like, it's not trying to present something that doesn't feel real. It's not trying to present this grand, over the top romance where they're going to fast foreign places and Isabel gets a make-a-wish situation where she gets to go off to Holland or whatever, but no shade to Fault in Our Stars. It's just one of those films that's like, it wants to show you the possibility of something happening that may not seem like the norm to you, but is something that could actually happen to someone. But with that said, there is a vomiting scene about an hour and 5 minutes in, so if that like is triggering for you, you may want to speed through the point where Darren tries weed and apparently eats it instead of smokes it. Which leads to our review section and specifically the highlights. The first highlight I think needs to be how Smith plays his role, how Delevingne plays their role, and how the two mesh together. When it comes to Smith, if you're familiar with his work, especially towards his more adult years, he knows how to play that sort of surfer skater dude who kind of comes off as a pothead, who's very like monotone and chill. And with that, you can kind of get the vibe, you can kind of get the feeling of Xavier's influence on Darren and how Smith is able to bring that persona, which seems to be his comfort zone, into the role. This character who doesn't need to be grandeur, who doesn't need to be big and boastful. He's just, as much as he has these notable accomplishments, it's not like these accomplishments are the biggest thing that ever happened to him or the biggest thing that happened in the universe. They're just things he's done because he needs to reach this specific goal. And then when it comes to Isabel, now I won't say Delevingne only knows how to play eccentric, love interest characters, but you can definitely say, like with Smith, she has this comfort zone or this role type or trope, whichever you want to use, that is very much a comfort to her and that is her niche. And with playing Isabel, you can see that this is definitely a type of character you can see her playing again and again and again. And not to the point where it bores you or feels repetitive, but just simply, depending on who she's playing off of, it can work. And when it comes to Smith and Delevingne playing off each other, because he can feel dry as all hell, and her this kind of zany manic pixie dream girl type, it meshes well because they're opposites who attract. When it comes to Darren, you can see that as much as you may want to call Isabella Manic Pixie Dream Girl, once they start noting her insecurities, her issues because of her parents' abandonment, it makes Darren less of somebody who benefits from her and the catalyst she acts as to get his life jump started, and more you see Darren trying to, throughout the whole film, win her over and go against all the things that she fears. Not just the fact that she's about to die within a year, but the fact that she fears intimacy, the fact that she fears he won't be consistent, that he won't be able to provide some type of stable life, and not stable life in terms of money, because Darren ain't got no money, he ain't got no job. I'm talking about Darren providing stability in the fact that maybe stability is not the best word, but consistency and dependability, because Isabel knows what she's going to go through, what she's going through at the moment, and also has baggage that makes it so the past is not something easy to put aside. So watching him and her go back and forth, especially with their one more time thing when it comes to dating or giving Darren another chance, because lest we forget, Darren hasn't had much of a life outside of his two friends. He has not dated, so this is his first real relationship, and it's with somebody who's not only his opposite in terms of personality, but different socioeconomic background, different race, which is not really gone into. And you can just see that he's learning on the go, and she's trying to be patient with him, yet also challenge him, which is how things balance out between them. Because as much as she may push him to start focusing on his music career and what he's actually passionate about, there's also this push from Darren to make it so even if she feels like she shouldn't make long-term plans, that doesn't mean that she should just live for grand moments like sneaking into a Big Sean concert. That there could be little things day to day that can make her happy and make her feel like life is worth living. And speaking of Darren's music, two songs co-written by Jaden Smith are in the film, possibly more. And Admittedly, they're not the type that gonna be on a Billboard Hot 100, but they bump a little bit. You may think they're a bop. And I would even say that the first song, which he kind of stumbles into before he really starts getting going, you may actually really like, and the second song helps when it comes to giving the ending a punch. Though one of the things besides Isabel, which gives this movie a punch, is definitely Xavier and Darren's relationship. So, for anybody who's ever watched Red Table Talk, you definitely will be aware that when it comes to Will Smith, his expectations and his vision for his family, especially his kids, was intense for a long period of time. With Willow, she spoke about how the whole "with my hair" situation led her to suicidal thoughts and even cutting herself. And Jaden, because Jada was so much part of his upbringing and how he was managed, you can tell that she kept things from getting that far, but it doesn't mean that Jaden wasn't as affected. And when it comes to Xavier and Darren's relationship, I keep wanting to say Jaden instead of Darren. When it comes to Xavier and Darren's relationship, you can definitely see an almost Will and Jaden situation going on, especially since even though Xavier didn't come up through the music industry, but rather he was in janitorial services, that sense of expectation, that sense of I'm trying to build a legacy here, the sense that yes, because of my wealth, you have all these opportunities, yet I want you to focus on opportunities that would actually make you money and definitely repeat my success. You can see a lot of their dynamic possibly mirroring what Jaden has been through. Yet even in the unique perspective of the fact that Xavier is not trying to necessarily have Darren be going to janitorial services, you have to also respect the fact that when it comes to Xavier, even though he goes to the extreme sometimes to the point he almost punches Darren in the face, there's that fear that you can definitely see that what happened to him could feel like a once in a lifetime thing that doesn't get repeated, and that whatever issues that Xavier's family had with money in the past, they could easily hit his son. And so, even though his son grew up going to what looked like a private school and all this opportunity, it will mean nothing in the long run. Yet, when it comes to Darren on the flip side, you do, especially as the movie goes on, you get to see this whole, what's the best way to put it? In a Breakfast Club interview a long time ago, Donald Glover said that Jaden Smith once said to him, the one thing black people need is a chance to fail. And when it comes to how Darren feels towards Xavier and their situation, you can see that despite all the opportunities, the wealth and privilege that Xavier gives, he never gave his son a chance to fail and truly discover himself. So instead, Darren felt like he had to be made small and fit into his father's dream, rather than allow himself to truly grow and be who he wants to be, explore his own fantasies, passions, and try to bring them into reality. And as time goes on, you see them try to what is it? The best way to put it. As you can see them fight for Darren's future, you get the sense that is eventually no longer just Catherine caring about Darren's happiness, but it's both parents working together so that their son can be who he wants to be and has support that for a long time was very circumstantial when it comes to Xavier. Jumping back to Phil just for a hot minute, even though the film doesn't really strongly focus on LGBT issues, race issues, gender dynamics and stuff like that, I still find the need to appreciate. So even if it is Christiella, you're playing them who isn't, to our understanding or knowledge, a trans person or somebody who lives and breathes that type of life, there is this need still to admire the fact that with two black characters, Phil is not treated as a thing and it or anything like that. Phil is just this odd person who comes into their life, and as soon as they see that their personality is chill, they're kind of funny, they're like, okay, You're no harm to me, so I have no reason to worry about who you are, what you do, because you're just a cool person to me. And I really like the fact that they do that because usually the only time we see that kind of humanity is when it's just strictly LGBTQIA plus focused, rather than when you see like, especially in a film that's primarily focused on black people, where you can kind of get the vibe that like when Xavier and Darren met Phil, there's no like joke to it. There's confusion certainly, but there's no like Martin Lawrence or 90s comedy type where you feel like as much as you can tell they're kind of confused and ignorant, it's not like made into a joke that to protect themselves and protect their ego that they don't know who or they're speaking to. Rather, Phil is just Phil. It's left at that. There's no real follow-up questions, and the film really benefits from not having that speed bump in it. But with that said, in terms of on the fence type of topics, the film might feel long only because, as much as you have to appreciate Delevingne's energy, how Smith plays off of her, and also Gooding Jr., it's still a romance film. Not only that, it's a young adult tragic romance film, so even with the usual I messed up, I gotta win you back, trying to deal with all the baggage both characters have, and then people working things out with their parents and dealing with death and all that. It's still very much based off of events that you know are gonna happen, and with the film not really changing the formula that much, it makes it so everything is kind of predictable. And as you hit one milestone after another that you know is going to happen, it does make you wonder, okay, how much time into the next moment? How much time until she is starting to die? How long is she going to take to die? And how long is the death scene going to be? Yet, even with the whole feeling that there's still milestones and certain things you know are going to happen, I think this is worth seeing. It's one of those films where, even with expectations of what's going to happen, you knowing what's going to happen and seeing it happen, and you still, by the end of the movie, find yourself in tears. I would even say when it comes to Smith and Delevingne, as much as no actor wants to be typecasted, at the same time they have found and like honed in on this niche that they're good at, to the point where even if Delevingne just plays this kind of weird girlfriend for the rest of her career, or it's just the weird character who has this high energy, it's not terrible. And then when it comes to Smith, even he plays this kind of monotone, chill dude, you know, even in those like limited perceptions of them, there's still certain ranges they can play. It's just a question of between their agent, them, or those people interested in their work and possibly working with them, will they see beyond what limited scope a lot of us have been given. And when it comes to the director, whose name I'm hopefully not butchering, it's Mitja Okorn. You can get a sense between them and the two writers, Jeffrey Addiss and Will Matthews, that they figured out a way to both take what Smith and Delevingne are good at and slowly and surely push it beyond what they usually put out there, so that you can see when it comes to those two as actors, it's not so much that they have limited skills, but people who they work with have limited visions. Hence the positive rating. And also, if you want to watch this, it's on Amazon Prime, so if you don't have it, there's a link in the description for a free trial, so you can just watch this movie, keep it moving.